Rain braided silver veins down Fifth Avenue, making the city shimmer like a nervous diamond. Inside Maison Bellamy, where soft jazz mingled with the perfume of wealth and every reflection looked better than reality, a young woman stepped in from the storm. Her name was Grace Davis, and she had no right to be there. Her coat was thrift store wool, damp and stubbornly buttoned. Her shoes, once white, were thin from double shifts, the left heel wobbling like an old apology. She held a worn envelope against her chest, containing the exact cash she needed to secure a room in Queens before her landlord changed the lock. But first, she needed something she could barely afford: dignity in the form of decent shoes. She crossed the polished floor, past rows of heels displayed like rare artifacts. Her eyes stopped on a pair of black pumps, clean, poised, reliable. Shoes that could walk her into the receptionist job interview tomorrow and say everything she couldn't afford to explain. "Can I help you?" The saleswoman's tone dripped courtesy and condescension in equal measure. Her name tag read, Sloan. Behind her, two other associates hovered like echoes in pearl earrings. "I'm just looking," Grace said softly. "For what?" Sloan tilted her head, her smile slicing thin. "Or for whom?" Grace pointed to the shoes. "Size 8, please." Sloane's eyes flicked down at the waitress shoes, the frayed coat, the envelope clutched too tightly. "Are you sure? We do have a clearance section." Grace's cheeks flushed. 8, she repeated. "Please." The chorus of associates smirked. One whispered, "Dreamer," as Sloane walked away. Grace sat on the velvet stool, her pulse trying to outrun humiliation. She glanced around. Marble, mirrors, people who didn't notice her existence. When Sloane returned, she held the box as if it contained a moral lesson. Grace slid the shoe on. It fit like possibility. She stood, taller, straighter. The mirror returned a woman she barely recognized, still trembling but standing anyway. "How much?" she asked. Sloane quoted a number that could feed Grace for 2 weeks. Her heart dropped, but she did the math. Rent, groceries, bus fare. She could make it work if she skipped dinner and believed in luck. "I'll take them," she said. Sloane blinked, caught off guard. Of course. She tapped her nails loud enough to summon curiosity. "Payment?" Grace opened the envelope. "Cash?" "Oh," Sloane said, her voice sugar-coated steel. "How quaint." The sound of a low chuckle rolled across the marble floor. 2 men had entered the store, suits dark as midnight. One taller, broader, carrying authority like a shadow that never left him. He said something in Italian that made his companion smirk. As Sloane counted the bills, she paused. "One short," she said loudly. "Happens." Grace's stomach twisted. "It can't be," I counted. Sloane shrugged. "Math is hard. I can put the rest on my card." Grace said quietly. "It should cover—" "Don't worry," Sloane said sweetly. "We're used to dreamers." The laughter stung, and then that same low voice interrupted. "Pack the shoes." Sloane turned. The tall man from the staircase was walking toward them, the room rearranging itself to make space for him. His coat was unbuttoned, rain still whispering across his shoulders. His eyes, cold, sharp, calculating, met Sloane's, and every ounce of arrogance she had evaporated. "Mr. Ricci," she breathed. "Of course." Grace blinked. The name hung in the air like thunder. Luca Ricci, a name whispered more than spoken. The kind of man whose favor people collected and whose anger they didn't survive. "I can pay," Grace said quickly, mortified. "You don't have to—" Luca's gaze met hers, calm, level. "No one said you asked." Her heartbeat forgot its rhythm. "Gift wrap?" Sloane asked weakly. "No," Luca said. "She'll wear them out." Grace hesitated, then quietly. "I prefer to decide that myself." Something flickered behind his eyes, a trace of respect. "Then decide." She met his stare, unflinching. "I'll wear them out." Sloane opened the box. Grace bent down, replaced her old shoes, wrapped them in tissue. The new pair hugged her feet like confidence rediscovered. Luca's card covered the counter without a word. Sloane didn't dare meet his gaze. The store, for a heartbeat, felt like a courtroom where everyone else had already lost. As Grace turned to leave, a man in a baseball cap stepped from the umbrella rack and blocked her path. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, eyes roaming. "Need some company?" Before Grace could move, Luca's hand wrapped around the man's wrist. "Touch her," Luca said softly, dangerously, "and you won't lift that hand again." The man froze. The entire store went silent. "Apologize," Luca said. The man laughed nervously. "To a waitress?" Luca's jaw flexed. "To Grace Davis." The man looked between them, fear catching up to arrogance. Sorry." Luca released him with surgical precision. "Leave." The man fled. Luca turned to Grace. "Do you have someone waiting for you?" "No," she said, honest and unguarded. "Then I'll walk you." She wanted to refuse out of pride, but exhaustion won. She nodded. He didn't take her arm. He simply walked beside her, exactly her pace, matching her silence. Outside, the rain had softened, but the city still watched. Who was this man who stopped storms by speaking softly? And what debt had begun the moment he said her name aloud? The subway roared beneath the city like something restless. Grace and Lucas sat across from each other, neither pretending to be comfortable. The car was half full, students, night workers, one man asleep under a newspaper, and yet it felt like there were only two people in the world. "What do you do?" she asked at last, watching their reflections tremble in the window. "Paperwork," he said. She raised a brow. "That's a vague answer." He almost smiled. "It's the safest kind. You make it sound illegal. Depends who's reading it." His voice was steady, the kind that could make danger sound like good advice. Grace studied the angle of his jaw, the stillness in his hands. They weren't the hands of a man used to waiting. They were the kind that built and broke things. "You always rescue strangers in shoe stores?" she asked, testing the line between curiosity and fear. "Only the ones who don't ask to be rescued," he said. "That's a convenient policy." "It's an honest one." He shifted slightly, the train humming beneath them. "And what do you do, Miss Davis?" "I serve coffee and survive New York," she said. "One customer, one rent notice at a time. That's a harder job than mine." "I doubt that," she said. "Yours comes with tailored suits." He looked at her then, really looked. Tailored suits can't make you sleep at night. They just make the nightmares look presentable. For a moment the train was silent, except for the scrape of metal and the faint hum of a violinist at the far end. The sound echoed like an echo of something older than both of them. When the car slowed at Queensboro, she stood. He stood too. "You don't have to," she started. "I know," he said. "But I will." On the stairs, the rain returned in tiny, glittering drops. The sky glowed orange from the streetlights, and steam curled from the grates like secrets escaping. Grace wrapped her coat tighter, but the wind still reached her. Luca matched her stride, saying nothing, just existing in a way that made the world feel less hostile. When they reached her street, she gestured to the cracked brick building. "That's me." He looked up at the windows. "You live alone?" She hesitated. "Yes." "Then don't open your door to anyone who knocks twice. If it's important, they'll wait once." She blinked. "That sounds like advice from someone who's had enemies." He met her gaze. "That sounds like advice from someone who's still alive." They stood there, two strangers whose worlds weren't meant to overlap. The air between them was electric but clean, neither promise nor danger, just awareness. "Good night, Grace," he said finally. "Good night, Luca." He started walking away. She watched his shadow disappear at the corner, swallowed by the rain. Grace climbed the narrow stairs, opened her door, and leaned against it as soon as it closed. Her hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the strange electricity of being seen by someone who shouldn't have looked. She didn't know if she should feel safe or exposed. Outside, the city had already begun whispering. By morning, Maison Bellamy had a new rumor. One version said the poor waitress had faked a scene to attract a rich man's attention. Another claimed the Mafia boss, yes, that was what people called Luca Ricci when they thought he couldn't hear, had a new obsession. Grace didn't know any of this. She was too busy counting coins at her kitchen table, trying to stretch them into breakfast. The newspaper beneath the coins bore a headline about real estate tycoons, But what caught her eye was a small column. Philanthropist Luca Ricci funds new scholarship for single mothers. She frowned. Philanthropist? She whispered. Sure. Still, she reread the article twice. When she left for her shift at Romano's cafe, the rain had stopped. The sidewalks were slick, the air clean. She didn't see the black sedan parked at the corner with tinted windows, or the man inside reading a file that had her name printed neatly across the top. At the cafe, her boss Marcus Romano was waiting near the counter. You're late, he said. It's 2 minutes before my shift, she replied. Technically early. Don't be smart, Grace. Not with me. He leaned close enough for her to smell the espresso on his breath. You've been keeping interesting company, huh? Her pulse skipped. What are you talking about? Word travels, he said. You left your dignity at a luxury store and some rich guy picked it up for you. Grace straightened. If you're trying to insult me, you'll have to be more creative, Marcus smirked. Careful, sweetheart. Guys like him don't save girls like you. They rent them. The tray in her hand trembled. She set it down before it could become a weapon. You're disgusting, she said, walking away. Maybe, he said, but at least I'm honest. The rest of her shift passed in a haze of steaming milk and swallowed anger. By closing time, her feet ached, but the new shoes still made her feel taller. She walked home, head high, pretending not to notice the car parked across the street again. Upstairs, she found an envelope under her door. No name, just her address scrawled in sharp ink. Inside was a single business card. Black embossed letters, Luca Ricci, Ricci Holdings. On the back, handwritten, for what you deserve, not what they offer. She exhaled shakily, half touched, half terrified. The card smelled faintly of cedar and something expensive. She slid it into the back of a drawer and told herself she'd forget about it. But she didn't. The next morning, the city woke up gossiping. By noon, Grace's photo was circulating in private group chats among Fifth Avenue employees. Someone had pulled the store's camera footage, cropped it, and added a caption. Cinderella's got a sponsor. By evening, the same image reached places it shouldn't have. An online forum frequented by people who tracked powerful men's movements like weather patterns. Underneath, a single comment with 3 words. Luca Ricci watched. Grace had no idea any of this was happening. But Luca did. And so did someone else. Someone who had been waiting for a reason to make him bleed. Late that night, Grace dreamed she was walking barefoot through the same store again. Except the shoes were gone and everyone's faces were turned away. The mirrors reflected her, but not her alone. Behind her, always behind her, a shadow walked in sync. She woke with her heart galloping and rain whispering against the window. And somewhere across the city, Luca Ricci sat at a desk surrounded by papers that weren't paperwork at all. Files, names, balances of favors. And in the center of it, a single photograph of a woman in black pumps standing in a world that didn't deserve her yet. He didn't know why he'd kept it there, but he also didn't know how to throw it away. What happens when kindness costs reputation, and who pays the interest when rumors start earning profit? The hospital's lobby smelled of disinfectant and dreams held together by paperwork. Grace stood near the receptionist's desk, clutching her folder of documents like armor. Her reflection in the glass doors looked steadier than she felt. A woman in her 40s appeared with the kind of authority that didn't need introduction. Her badge read, Miss Klein. Her expression said she had seen every excuse twice. Grace Davis, Klein said. You're early. I prefer that, Grace answered. Klein led her down a hallway where the carpet changed color halfway through, hope turning into administration. Why do you want to work here? Grace didn't give the practiced answer. Because hospitals see people at their worst, and I'm good at staying calm when everything else isn't. Klein's pen hovered. Last employer? Romano's Cafe. Ah, Klein said. The one on 12th Avenue. We've had reports about that place. Grace nodded. Some of them are true, none of them mine. Klein almost smiled. And if someone speaks to you rudely? I listen once, Grace said. After that I translate. The older woman tilted her head. Translate. I turn what they meant into what they should have said. It saves time. Klein paused, then wrote something down. We'll be in touch. When Grace stepped outside, The sky had turned the color of resignation. She bought a single white rose from the flower stand near the corner, her one superstition. She called it balance, something soft for a hard day. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Miss Davis?" a voice said. "This is Mr. Bellamy's office, Maison Bellamy." Grace froze. "Yes?" "There's been a complaint regarding your behavior during yesterday's incident. Mr. Bellamy would like to review the security footage with you this afternoon." Grace blinked. "A complaint? From who?" "Please arrive by 4. Use the private entrance." He hung up before she could answer. By 4, she was there. Same marble, same perfume of money. But this time, no jazz. A man in a navy sweater waited behind a screen, fingers steepled. Oliver Bellamy. "Ms. Davis," he said, not rising. "We appreciate your cooperation." He pressed play. Footage flickered. Her soaked coat, Sloane's smirk, the cash on the counter. Then, a jump. The frame skipped. The moment the man in the cap touched her shoulder vanished. Grace leaned forward. "Where's the rest?" "Corrupted footage," Oliver said smoothly. "Unfortunate coincidence." Her jaw tightened. "Coincidence doesn't usually arrive on time." "Perhaps you invited attention," he said. "Mr. Ricci dislikes being dragged into publicity." Her pulse spiked. "I didn't invite anything." He smiled faintly. "Men like him don't intervene without reason. You must have been—" The door opened. The air changed. Luca Ricci entered like gravity remembered its job. "You were saying?" he asked softly. Oliver paled. "Mr. Ricci." "You cut the footage," Luca said. "Sloppy work. My servers don't glitch. They answer to me." Oliver swallowed. "We're simply protecting privacy." "You mean your reputation?" Luca's voice never rose. It didn't have to. "Apologize to Ms. Davis." Oliver blinked. "For what?" "For assuming money is a mirror," Luca said. "It isn't. It's glass. You see through it if you're honest enough." Grace stood silent, her heart a drum she couldn't slow. He turned to her. "You shouldn't have come alone." "I can fight my own battles," she said quietly. "I don't doubt that," he said. "But I prefer to choose the field." For the first time, Oliver looked afraid. Not of Luca's power, but of how calm he was while using it. "Fix the records," Luca said. "And send her a written apology, hand-delivered." He walked out without waiting for a reply. Grace followed him into the hall. "You didn't have to." "Yes," he said. "I did." They stepped into the street. The rain had stopped. The sky was bruised with sunset. "I don't owe you," she said, standing her ground. "No," he said, almost smiling. "But I owe myself the reminder that not everyone folds." She looked away, unsure what to do with the ache in her chest. "Goodbye, Luca." "For now," he said. She didn't know that for now would become a promise, not a farewell. That evening, back in her apartment, her phone rang again. "Ms. Davis, this is Ms. Klein's office. Could you return at 5? We have a decision." She froze. "So soon?" "Yes," the voice said. "We'd like to make an offer." She hung up slowly, staring at the white rose on her table. Some debts, it seemed, were paid in opportunities. What happens when truth reappears after being edited out? And what new door opens when a man who never waits starts waiting for someone? Monday morning, the hospital lobby glowed with that false kind of peace found only in places built to hide pain. Grace stood straighter than she felt, her badge swinging on a new lanyard. Receptionist, Linden Medical Center. When Ms. Klein passed by, she didn't smile, just nodded, which meant approval. Grace took that as victory. She learned the software in an hour, the phone system in 2, and the rhythm of emergencies by lunch. By 3 p.m., she was answering calls with a calm that nurses found unnerving. She was good at this, at being the steady voice on the line while everyone else panicked. At 5, Ms. Klein stopped by her desk. "You adapt quickly." "I've been improvising for years," Grace said. Klein nodded. "Keep that energy." When the shift ended, Grace walked outside to a gray sky smelling faintly of rain. The street was crowded, taxis, late buses, voices. A man handed out flyers for a jazz bar downtown. She took one without thinking, folded it into her pocket. Her phone buzzed. "Unknown number. If you're free tonight, there's music." Her pulse jumped. Only one person would send that. Grace. What kind? Luca. The kind that forgives the weak. She hesitated, smiling despite herself. Grace. Where? Luca. I'll send a car. It's safer than trusting the subway after dark. Grace. I can take care of myself. Luca. I know. That's why I'd like you to get there in one piece. She stared at the screen, then typed 2 words. Grace. 7 o'clock. At 7, a black sedan waited by the curb. The driver opened the door like a ritual. Inside, the city blurred by in streaks of gold and violet. Grace caught her reflection in the tinted glass. She didn't look poor anymore. She looked like possibility. The bar was hidden beneath an old church downtown. Candlelight, saxophone, a smell of whiskey and stories. Luca stood near the stage, sleeves rolled, collar open, no tie. He looked less like danger and more like control, disguised as charm. You came, he said. You asked, she replied. He smiled, not a wide smile, but the kind that made a woman forget her escape plan. They sat at a corner table, shadows moving like slow dancers. The band began to play, a melody made of heartbreak and second chances. What's your drink? He asked. Something I can afford to spill, she said. He ordered whiskey. She chose wine. When the glasses arrived, he raised his, waiting for her to raise hers first. Respect, silent and deliberate. To what? She asked. To better stories, he said. They drank. The room melted into warm brass and laughter. Grace exhaled, realizing she hadn't relaxed in months. You don't talk much, she said. I was told silence lasts longer than lies. Who told you that? My aunt, he said, eyes softening. She owned a bakery in Naples. Said sweetness was the only weapon that didn't draw blood. Grace smiled. Smart woman. She was, he said. She made cannoli for men who carried guns. Fed both sides so nobody killed each other before dessert. Grace laughed, but her eyes stayed on him. And you? Which side were you on? He thought for a moment. The side that hates wasting good pastry. For the first time, she saw him as more than a name with a rumor attached. There was humor in him, sadness too. A whole world carved in restraint. Do your hands ever shake? She asked suddenly. He blinked. Why would they? Because everyone's afraid of something. Luca looked at his hands, the ones that could command, defend, destroy. They used to, when I realized I was starting to like someone honest. Her breath caught. He didn't mean it as a confession, but it landed like one. The saxophone wailed, and the crowd applauded. Grace looked away, heart drumming faster than the rhythm. He leaned forward slightly. Tell me something true. She hesitated. I failed biology 3 times, she said. I can read people better than textbooks. He smiled. That's more useful in my line of work. And what line is that? He swirled the whiskey. The kind that pays for quiet. So you're a professional secret keeper? Something like that, he said. And you? What do you keep? My sanity, she said. And rent receipts. He chuckled, low and genuine. That's rarer than gold in this city. They talked until the candles burned low. She forgot the clock existed. When they finally stepped outside, the night had gone still. He offered no promises, no questions, just a look that said, you changed something, and I'm not sure how yet. He walked her home. At her door, he didn't ask to come in. She didn't invite him. They stood in the doorway, a breath apart. Good night, Grace. Good night, Luca. When he left, the hallway felt too quiet, too small. She pressed her back to the door, closing her eyes. She didn't see the shadow watching from across the street. Someone who didn't belong in this part of town. Someone who would soon sell a photograph that would change everything. The next morning, Grace arrived early to work again. The white rose from yesterday sat on her desk in a water glass. Beside it, a note in clean handwriting. For what the week will require. No signature. But she knew. That afternoon, Ms. Klein stopped by with a thin smile. Good work, Ms. Davis. You handle people well. Thank you. Even the difficult ones. Especially them, Grace said. Klein tapped the rose. You have admirers already? Grace's pulse tripped. Just friends. Friends who know where you work? Klein asked. Grace looked down. Lucky guess. Klein didn't push. Keep your personal life personal. Hospitals feed on gossip. When she left, Grace exhaled slowly. She picked up the rose. Its stem had thorns, but none had drawn blood, yet. That night, the city roared again. But Grace heard only the echo of a voice that had said, "You changed something." She wasn't sure if that was a promise or a warning. Across town, Luca sat in his penthouse office, staring at the skyline. Matteo, his oldest friend and lieutenant, poured himself a drink. "You're distracted," Matteo said. "I'm considering," Luca replied. "Considering what?" "What it costs to tell the truth to someone who's never heard it." Matteo smiled faintly. "And what's the price?" Luca looked out at the lights. "Everything." He didn't say Grace's name, but it lived in every silence afterward. When men who control chaos start craving peace, do they lose their power or finally understand it? And when a woman used to surviving starts to trust, what will she do when the storm comes again? By Monday afternoon, Grace had learned the sound of every kind of emergency. The sharp ring meant a heart attack. The double chime meant surgery delay. The soft buzz meant someone's family was asking for news they weren't ready to hear. She handled each one the same way. Calm voice, clear words, no promises she couldn't keep. She was good at her job, and Ms. Klein noticed. The woman didn't praise. She simply passed by and said, "You've lasted longer than most." That was approval, in Klein's language. At noon, a delivery arrived. A small glass cylinder with a single white rose. The card read, "For what the week will require." Grace smiled before she could stop herself. She placed it beside her computer monitor. One of the nurses raised a brow. "Secret admirer?" "Probably just a friend," Grace said too quickly. By 4, the hospital slowed. The air turned heavy, the kind of quiet that always comes before bad news. Grace signed out, packed her things, and stepped into the drizzle waiting outside. She didn't see Marcus until he spoke. "Long day, sweetheart?" He leaned against the lamppost, hands in pockets, the same smirk he'd worn back at Romano's cafe, the smirk that had once been a promise, now a warning. "What do you want, Marcus?" "Just to talk." He moved closer. "You disappeared. No goodbye. No thank you." "I didn't realize you'd earned either," she said. His smile thinned. "Still have that mouth, huh?" "I learned it from surviving men who mistake cruelty for charm." He stepped closer again. "Careful, Grace. The city isn't kind to girls who get brave." "I'm not brave," she said softly. "I'm just done." That should have ended it. But Marcus never liked endings he didn't write himself. He glanced at her badge. "Receptionist, huh? Classy. You think that man of yours knows where you came from?" Her heart lurched. "What man?" "Don't play stupid. The whole neighborhood's seen the photo." Her breath stopped. "What photo?" Marcus pulled his phone from his pocket, thumb sliding over the screen, and turned it toward her. The picture showed her and Luca at Maison Bellamy, the moment before he'd said, "Pack the shoes." But cropped differently, the angle was cruel, the timing precise. It looked intimate, scandalous, false, and dangerous. Her chest tightened. "Where did you get this?" "Friends," he said. "Some of them have questions, others have demands." "Demands? Information, a name, maybe 2. You could make all this go away, Grace, or you could watch it spread." "You think I'm afraid of gossip?" He leaned closer, whispering. "You should be afraid of who's paying for it." Grace stared at him, the rain starting to bite her skin. "You're pathetic." He smirked. "Maybe, but I'm still standing. Can you say the same for your new friend?" She turned and walked away before her hands did something reckless. Behind her, Marcus called out, "Be careful what you owe, sweetheart. The city always collects." That night, Grace couldn't sleep. The photo burned in her mind. She sat on her couch, knees drawn up, scrolling through her phone. No messages from Luca, none from unknown numbers, only silence, the kind that hides teeth. At 2 a.m., she gave up and went to the window. The rain had stopped. The streetlight flickered, reflecting off puddles like pieces of a broken mirror. She saw a shadow move. Someone standing across the street, motionless, coat collar high. watching. Her breath caught. Then the figure turned and walked away, vanishing into darkness. The next morning, Grace arrived at the hospital pale and tense. Ms. Klein noticed immediately. "Rough night?" "Just tired," Grace said. Klein didn't believe her, but she didn't press. "You have a visitor." Grace blinked. "Who?" Before she could ask again, the woman appeared. Tall, sleek, beautiful in a way that cost money. She wore a trench coat the color of champagne and carried herself like someone used to winning arguments before they began. "Ms. Davis?" she asked smoothly. "I'm Camille Rossi." Grace stood. "Do I know you?" Camille smiled without warmth. "No, but we have a man in common." Every word was a blade. Klein discreetly excused herself. "I'm here to offer you advice," Camille continued. "Luca Ricci's attention is dangerous currency. Spend it wrong, and you'll discover how quickly it depreciates." Grace kept her voice level. "Is this supposed to scare me?" "It's supposed to inform you." Camille stepped closer, perfume sharp as wine. "Men like him don't save women. They collect them. Be careful before you become another souvenir." Grace's hands clenched at her sides. "And what are you? The tour guide?" Camille's eyes glittered. "I'm the reason he still has a reputation left to ruin." She slid a folded piece of paper onto the desk. "You'll see soon enough." Then she was gone. Her heels clicked down the corridor like punctuation marks at the end of a warning. Grace unfolded the paper. It was a photograph. The same one Marcus had shown her. But this one had a line scrawled on the back in elegant handwriting. "Know your place." Her pulse hammered. She slipped the photo into her bag and finished her shift with robotic calm. Every phone call blurred into static. Every smile felt borrowed. That night she sat on her bed, staring at the photo. The edges curled where her fingers had held too tight. She didn't cry. She'd run out of tears years ago. Then her phone buzzed. "Unknown number. You should come talk to me. We can fix things before they break." "Grace, who is this?" "Unknown. A man who prefers photographs that don't lie." 8 p.m. Romano's Cafe. Back room. Her blood went cold. Marcus. It had to be. She looked at the clock. 7:17. She told herself not to go, that she owed him nothing, that Luca would tell her to stay home. But the thought of that photograph, of someone twisting it into something worse, was enough. At 80 sharp, she pushed open the back door of Romano's Cafe. Marcus sat at a small table, cigarette burning untouched. "You came," he said. "Good. Saves time. Say what you have to say." He leaned back, smirking. "My friends want that photo buried. But they also want answers. Who sent Luca Ricci to that store? Who told him your name?" "No one," she said. "He was just there." Marcus laughed. "You really think men like that just show up?" He slid another photo across the table. This one darker, grainier. Luca walking into Maison Bellamy. Grace arriving 5 minutes earlier. The timestamps matched too neatly to be chance. Her throat tightened. "You followed me." "Correction," Marcus said. "Someone followed him. I just bought the pictures." "Why?" He shrugged. "Because information is valuable. And maybe I still like the idea of you owing me." "I don't owe you anything." He smiled. "You always say that right before you pay." Before Grace could answer, the door opened behind her. The air shifted. Luca Ricci stood there. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't move fast. But Marcus stopped smiling. "Walk away," Luca said quietly. "Now." Marcus opened his mouth. "This is business." "Wrong," Luca said. "This is education." He walked forward, slow and deliberate, like gravity reclaiming what belonged to it. "You took something that wasn't yours. My patience." Marcus tried to laugh, but his voice broke. "She's not your property." Luca stopped an inch away from him. "You're right. That's why I'm still talking." He turned slightly, his gaze on Grace now, steady, calm, unflinching. "You shouldn't have come." "I had to," she said. "They're using my name, my face." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm here." For a heartbeat, the room was all silence and heartbeat and fear. Then Luca spoke to one of the men waiting by the door, a man in a dark suit who had been invisible until now. "Clean it up quietly." The man nodded, already moving. Luca looked back at Marcus. "You're going to apologize." Marcus's jaw clenched. "For what?" for making her think she was alone. He said nothing more. But the look was enough. Outside, the air was cold. The streetlights flickered, rain returning in thin silver threads. Grace hugged her coat tighter. "You think this fixes everything?" she asked. "It stops the bleeding," Luca said. "That's where you start." "I don't need saving." "I know," he said. "That's what makes you worth the trouble." She looked up at him. "And what trouble am I?" "The kind I don't regret." The words landed softly but stayed heavy. They stood in silence as a taxi passed, its lights cutting through mist. Finally, he spoke again. "They won't bother you anymore, but I'll make sure you're protected." She shook her head. "I can't be another problem for you." He smiled faintly. "You're not a problem, Grace. You're the only thing I haven't solved." Back in her apartment, Grace placed the photo in a drawer and locked it. But she knew it wasn't over. Not yet. Because for all the power Luca had, someone out there still wanted her name on the wrong story. And power, she'd learned, never slept. What's the price of peace when the past starts billing you for survival? And how far will a man go to keep one woman untouchable in a city that eats innocence for breakfast? The back room at Romano's cafe emptied like a tide. Paper changed hands. Voices lowered. Doors learned to close softly. Grace stood in the doorway for a second longer than necessary, as if the air itself might try to stop her from leaving. Outside, the city had shed the last of the rain and put on a thin, clean chill. Neon from the bodega across the street washed the sidewalk in coral light. She and Luca walked without speaking, the kind of quiet that doesn't owe an apology. When they reached the corner, a bus sighed and pulled away, revealing a newspaper box with tomorrow's headline already sleeping behind glass. Fifth Avenue House issues formal apology. The subhead promised reforms, training, a charitable donation to a women's shelter. The byline said, Oliver Bellamy. "So he learned," Grace said. "He remembered he could," Luca replied. They crossed at the light. She noticed how he never stepped ahead, never lagged behind, only beside, as if trusting her pace was a principle not to be broken. She wondered who had taught him that, the aunt with sugar under her nails, or the city by way of 1,000 small mistakes. 2 blocks away, a sedan idled with the patience of a well-trained dog. Matteo sat behind the wheel. Radio turned low to a talk show in a language only old men in kitchens spoke fluently. "You'll be all right?" Luca asked. Grace nodded. "I've been all right longer than I haven't. But yes." He searched her face, careful, unhurried. "If you change the locks tomorrow," he said, "call this number." He handed her a card with a name she didn't know, Felix Almeida, and a phone that didn't look like a business line. "He's particular about doors." "Does everyone who works for you sound like a story?" she asked. "The good ones do," he said, mouth tilting. She slid the card into her coat pocket and felt the white rose petal from days ago still tucked against the lining, dry and fragile as a secret that chose not to break. "Good night, Luca." He didn't move. "I'll wait until your light is on." "That's a little old-fashioned." "It's a little respect," he said simply. She didn't argue. She was tired of arguing with right things. Upstairs, she flicked on a lamp, then stood at the window to make sure he'd seen. He lifted a hand, no wave, just the acknowledgement of a signal understood. The sedan pulled away. The street inhaled. Grace leaned her forehead to the glass and let herself do something she rarely allowed, believe the next day could be better on purpose. The city woke early to an apology that didn't read like one written by a lawyer practicing empathy as a second language. Maison Bellamy's windows wore vinyl letters in the exact shade of contrition. Sloane's name vanished from the staff page with a neatness corporate sins rarely received. The clip that had been edited now circulated unedited, the man in the cap reaching. Luca's stillness making a room blink. Grace keeping her chin level because emotion in rooms like that is treated as a stain. At Linden Medical, Ms. Klein read the apology on her phone, her mouth a straight line softened by approval. She slid the device into a drawer, looked up as Grace Davis walked in, and said, "Good morning," in a tone that meant she had chosen a side. The phones rang. The day unspooled. Near noon, a woman in a winter coat too warm for the mild cold stepped to the desk and said, "I'd like to speak with Ms. Klein." Her hair was the color of money, her smile the shape of a sharpened spoon. Camille Rossi. Grace's body remembered a bruise that hadn't happened. Ms. Klein is with a patient liaison, she said. She'll be 20 minutes. I can wait, Camille said sweetly, and moved as if to set her handbag on the counter. Grace didn't stop her. There's seating over there, she said, nodding at a chair that looked uncomfortable on purpose. Would you like water? Camille's smile thinned. I see you've learned posture. I see you've learned timing, Grace returned, equally pleasant. 20 minutes later, Ms. Klein emerged with an expression reserved for people who tried to purchase gravity. Ms. Rossi, she said. I run a hospital desk, not a debutante ball. What do you want? Camille blinked, then recalibrated. I want to make sure your receptionist understands Mr. Ricci's orbit. Ms. Davis understands what time is, Klein said, and how to answer a phone. That's sufficient for me. Camille's eyes slid back to Grace. Be careful, dear. Men like him don't fall. They collapse buildings. Men like him also build clinics, Grace said, before she could decide to be quiet. If you came to warn me, consider me warned. If you came to scare me, you'll have to try again. For a heartbeat, Camille's face went entirely still, the rich woman's version of respect when someone refuses choreography. She inclined her head the smallest fraction. Noted, she said, and left a donation envelope at the desk addressed to Linden Family Fund that would underwrite 3 months of the taxi voucher program Ms. Klein kept alive with duct tape and fury. When Camille was gone, Klein glanced at Grace. You didn't flinch, she said. Grace shrugged. I was tired. That's usually when people flinch, Klein said, and returned to her office. At 2, a man in a blue jacket replaced the glass door at Grace's building with one that didn't rattle when Fear walked by. At 4, the super posted a notice about keys. At 5, a small boy named Miguel appeared at the hospital desk with a page torn from a composition book. It was a drawing of a man with a mustache and devil horns, and under it, in block letters, bad guy crossed out. Grace laughed and asked for a second copy. He gave her the original and told her he had more markers now. At 6, Marcus Romano stood at the front of his cafe and read a statement on his phone while his mother filmed him and cried silently into a tissue. The statement contained the words lied, harmed, apologize, and repair in that order. He didn't look up once. When he finished, the neighborhood board chair, who also ran the Wednesday food pantry, made him sign a monthly contribution pledge that cost less than his watch. He signed. He tried to smile. The watch looked heavier. At 8, a warehouse on the river locked an extra door, and a nephew with a baseball cap boarded a bus heading out of town carrying a bag heavier than a bus ticket usually required. Rossi sent a text of exactly 3 words to Luca. Debts corrected. Summer colder. And nothing more. Luca didn't reply. He didn't have to. Some conversations existed only to prove someone knew how to count. The next evening, Jazz forgave the week again. The bar under the church wasn't busy. Candlelight made everyone resemble a better version of their own mercy. Grace arrived wearing the same black pumps that began the war. She found Luca already seated, jacket folded, sleeves rolled, hands empty. Thank you, she said, and surprised herself by meaning it not in the currency of favors, but in the currency of being seen and left unbroken. You did most of it, he said. I just made sure the doors didn't jam. The band slid into a standard so old it felt like a promise that kept being kept. They didn't talk for the first song. It felt unnecessary. Between the second and third, she said, What would you be if you weren't this? A pastry chef, he said without missing a beat. She smiled. You're lying. He lifted a shoulder. Maybe. I like the idea of sweetness that heals on contact. You already fund clinics, she said. That's paper. This would be sugar. And me? She asked lightly, testing a cliff with her toe. What would I be if I weren't this? He thought longer than the question required. Still you, he said. Just less tired. The laugh that escaped her surprised them both. Is that a job title? It could be, he said. I'm hiring. I don't take salaries, she said. I take choices. Then take one of mine, he replied, and set a small envelope on the table between them. She stared at it like it might bite. What is it? Open it. Inside, on thick paper, was a lease agreement. Unit 3C 187 Orchard, a building she'd passed 100 times and loved for its chipped cornices and stoic fire escapes. The rent number was low enough to make doubt loud. Below it, a line in sharp ink: Ricci Trust Housing Initiative, Essential Workers Tier. Her name filled the tenant line in his meticulous hand. She swallowed. "I can't accept this." "You can apply for it," he said, "and be approved because you meet the criteria. Single tenant, essential worker, income cap, background as boring as any accountant could wish." "That's still you." "It's a program," he said. "I set it up for nurses and night shift cleaners and anyone who runs toward the alarm while the city looks for someone to blame. I don't hand keys to pretty women in bars." She held his gaze until the band changed songs. "Why me?" "Because you qualify," he said simply. "And because your landlord uses locks as threats." She put the envelope back on the table and curled her fingers away from it. "If I say yes, the story they tell becomes the story I live." He nodded. "If you say no, the rent still rises, the door still shakes, and I'm still going to fix the building you're in." She exhaled. "I don't want to be another line in your ledger." "You're not," he said. "You're the reason I started one that doesn't buy silence. It buys nights of sleep." She watched him watch her decision assemble from pieces she'd guarded too long. At last she slid the envelope into her bag. "I'll read it." That's all I wanted. They didn't discuss it again. They let the night be a night. When they stepped into the alley behind the church, the city had decided to be tender for once. He walked her toward the car, then stopped, the way men stop when they know the next sentence matters. "I am," he said quietly, "good at protecting what I care about. I am less good at deserving it." She looked at him for a long time, then reached for his sleeve and smoothed a wrinkle the way a person does when her hands are trying not to be obvious. "You don't get to decide that part alone." For an instant, something unarmored in his face appeared and didn't flinch before returning to its post. He opened the car door and didn't help her in. She didn't need help. When she sat, he leaned in, not close enough to break a rule, close enough to write a new one. "Tomorrow?" he asked. "Tomorrow," she said. Tomorrow arrived disguised as complication. At Linden, a donor breakfast turned into a board meeting, turned into a hallway ambush when an administrative VP with a talent for smiling like an invoice stopped Grace at the water cooler. "Miss Davis," she said brightly, "how wonderful to finally meet one of our success stories." Grace held the paper cup, waiting for the price. "Can I help you?" "We're hoping to feature you in a small newsletter piece. Faces of the front desk. Human interest. Inspirational." Grace pictured the photograph in a stranger's mailbox, a caption that would sound like a pat on the head. "No, thank you." The VP blinked. "It's good press." "For whom?" The smile thinned. "You could show young women what's possible. They can visit the hospital and watch me work. They don't need my biography in their mail." Ms. Klein appeared, summoned by the scent of performance. "The newsletter can profile the phone tree," she said dryly. "It's been here longer and saved more lives." The VP retreated, scandalized. Klein handed Grace a stack of forms. "You said no. Good. Keep saying it until the people who ask learn another trick." Grace filed the forms, then caught sight of a man lingering by the doorway. He wore a blue work jacket and carried a toolbox in a way that suggested competence instead of props. He lifted a hand. "Felix," he said, "here for the third-floor door at your place." "You prefer 2 deadbolts or 1 smart lock?" "Whichever one scares men who knock twice," she said. "Deadbolts it is," he replied, and left a written estimate heavy with words like threshold, shim, strike plate, the poetry of safety. At lunch, a group of nurses dragged Grace to a table behind the vending machines and asked her to teach them the trick where angry relatives left satisfied. She told them there was no trick, only patience where it hurt to have it and clarity where it was easier to be vague. They accused her of being a saint. She accused them of needing therapy. They traded candy bars for secrets and called it even. By evening, the new door was installed. Felix added a peephole and a chain as if it were 1979 and fear had nostalgia. He shook her hand like a man who liked the work more than the invoice, then left a bouquet of white roses on the stoop from the building, which meant from Luca, and also from the idea of a building that learns to take care of its people. On Friday night, Maison Bellamy held a private hour after closing. No press, no speeches, just a soft thing done right. The sales associates gathered, some embarrassed, some defensive, some careful. Oliver Bellamy stood in front of them with a face that had learned a new expression this week and wasn't sure it liked the fit. "We failed a guest," he said, voice even. "Not because she didn't belong here, because we forgot what belonging means. We will not do that again." He gestured to a small placard at the entrance. "No one pays extra to be respected." It was corny and necessary. Sloane, absent, would not read it. She had taken a position across town where glass didn't reflect as harshly. When the lights came up, a woman in a dark coat walked in quietly. She didn't shop. She didn't speak. She placed a single white rose on the glass counter and left. The night manager found it and understood just enough to put it in water. Saturday. A thrift store coat, freshly dry cleaned. The black pumps, scuffed now in a way that suggested use rather than accident. Grace stood outside 187 Orchard and stared at the door she might someday have a key to. The street smelled like garlic and Sunday sauce and a record store's basement. A kid chased a soccer ball between lampposts. Two old men argued over who played shortstop better in 1972. She thought about how a life fits inside a block and decides to stay. She texted Luca one word: "Here." He arrived 5 minutes later without ceremony, as if 5 minutes is a vow you can keep with your feet. He wore a sweater softer than his reputation and carried nothing but his hands. "Take a look," he said, and produced a key that wasn't a key card, wasn't an app, wasn't anything other than a promise cut from brass. The apartment on the 3rd floor had afternoon light that didn't hide. The floors creaked in the friendly way. The windowsills were deep enough for plants and elbows. The kitchen was a rectangle where cheap knives could learn to behave. She opened cabinets as if they were drawers in a new heart. She tested the faucet and laughed when it sputtered air like an old man surprised into delight. "It's small," she said, reverent, as if smallness were a sacrament. "It's yours if you want it," he said. "If you don't, it goes to the next person on the list Monday. Either way, the list moves." She turned, leaned her hip on the counter, and watched him stand there without touching a thing, as if he knew rooms need to decide whether a person fits them before the person decides it. "Why are you like this?" she asked, not an accusation, a curiosity. "Because a woman once told me sweet things don't get ruined by being shared," he said, "and because my father taught me the opposite, and I decided he could be wrong. And because of me." She was old enough to want the sentence unadorned. He met her gaze. "Because you made me want to be right in ways that cost me nothing and everything." The silence that followed did not need jazz. It needed only two people who finally trusted the sound of their own breathing in the same room. She reached into her bag and took out the photograph. The cruel one, edges softened by days in a drawer. She turned it over and showed him the caption she had written in black ink earlier that week, the first honest story the image had ever told. Not a spectacle, a beginning. He let out a breath that sounded suspiciously like relief. "May I?" he asked, and when she nodded, he tore the photograph in half with a neatness that suggested practice, not of breaking but of removing lies from rooms that didn't deserve them. He didn't reach for her. She didn't step into him. They let the new door stand between them like a friend. Then she closed the distance herself, the way a person chooses not to be brave but to be finally, simply, done with fear. She rested her forehead against his chest for one measured mortal second. His hand found the small of her back like a man obeying the simplest instruction he'd ever received. The city remembered how to be quiet. When she stepped back, he looked at her as if memorizing a map he'd decided to use for the rest of his life. "Dinner?" he asked. "Somewhere that doesn't punish forks." She smiled. "Or we could buy pasta and punish your kitchen." "Deal," he said instantly, and she realized he'd been waiting for ordinary like other men wait for heaven. They locked up. He gave the key back to the super with the paperwork already done and the deposit already wired from an account whose name would never appear on an envelope. On the sidewalk, a woman walked a dog that wore a sweater more expensive than Grace's coat. The dog sneezed at Luca and forgave him immediately. Signs were everywhere if you wanted them. They crossed to the market. He reached for a jar of sauce. She batted his hand away. "We're not buying sweetness," she said. "We're making it." He laughed, real, unguarded, the sound of a man who had learned the recipe for peace and discovered it required two people taking turns stirring. That night, they ate on his balcony because her kitchen wasn't hers yet. The city glittered like it had just remembered it doesn't owe anyone cruelty. He told her a story about stealing a car at 15 and returning it with a full tank. She told him one about a fourth-grade teacher who made her wear a sash that said loud, and how she had spent 10 years earning back her voice from a piece of cloth. When the plates were pushed aside, the conversation slowed into the kind of quiet that stops pretending it's fragile. He touched her cheek with the back of his fingers, and she let him. He kissed her like a man instructing himself to learn tenderness fluently and fast. She answered like someone who had finally decided tired could step aside for something with better posture. Below them, a siren wailed and faded. Somewhere, a train argued with its own schedule. A helicopter cut a line across the sky and thought better of it. Life continued with its usual appetite, but not here. Not for an hour that felt larger than it was. He rested his forehead against hers. "I don't know how to do this." "Gently," he admitted, almost apologizing. "You do," she said. "You've been doing it since a shoe store." He closed his eyes and breathed in a way that suggested prayer without religion. "Stay," he said, immediately correcting himself. "Or go home. Or tell me to stop asking you things you haven't had time to want yet." "I want tomorrow," she said, "and the day after, and a key I can put on a ring without feeling bought." He smiled. "I can do keys." "And I can do boundaries," she said. "We'll trade." "Deal," he said again, and it sounded like a lifetime. On Monday morning, the vinyl letters on Maison Bellamy's window had started to peel at the corners the way apologies do when the weather gets real. But people kept stopping to read them anyway. A woman took a picture, not to post, but to send to herself as proof that days can turn. At Linden, Ms. Klein forwarded an email to Grace with a single line. "Declined on your behalf." The newsletter found someone else's face to smile at. Felix texted a photo of Grace's new door with the caption "bite-proof" and a chain emoji. Marcus showed up at the pantry with a box of canned tomatoes and a silence Ms. Alvarez accepted with a nod. She put him to work sorting rice. He did not complain. He would again, probably, but not today. Camille Rossi mailed a check with too many zeros and no return address to the women's shelter that had just replaced their broken dishwasher. The director smiled at the generosity and smiled again at the anonymity. She had seen both kinds before and preferred the second. Vincenzo sent Luca a single-sentence update. "Servers loyal, staff trained, Bellamy boring." Luca replied with a thumbs up, not because he was lazy with words, but because he was learning where words matter and where they can rest. And on a block that had decided to keep her, Grace signed a lease, turned a key, and set a mug on a windowsill that faced a sky that wasn't expensive, just generous. She wrote 3 things on a sticky note and stuck it inside the cupboard, where only people who know how to look for the right things would ever see. Rent, mine. Work, mine. Love, chosen, not owed. She closed the cupboard, turned toward the door just as a knock sounded. Once, not twice. She opened it. Lucas stood there, a paper bag in one hand, the other hand empty on purpose. "I brought coffee," he said, "and the wrong kind of pastry so you can teach me." She stepped aside. "Come in," she said, "and learn." He did. They did. And when the city remembered to be cruel again, as it always does, it found 2 people who had learned how to be kind louder than it, together. The room had no mirrors that day. It didn't need them. No one inside was trying to be a reflection of anything except their own better decision. Some debts vanish when paid. Others become the currency you use to buy a future. They chose the second. The city took note, the way cities do. First with suspicion, then with relief, and finally with the quiet respect reserved for people who refuse to collapse when given a reason to stand. They didn't collapse. They built. And in a city that thinks it knows every ending, that was the one story it didn't laugh at. If you enjoy stories like this, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. That's how I'll know you truly liked it. Even if you're watching on your TV, grab a second to join this family of fans who love emotional and heartfelt stories. Your support means everything, and it helps us bring you even more tales like this one.